biggest thing I got out of this book is that true belonging is an inside job first. That's where we have to go first. Now, the good news for us here in Unity is that, and I'm gonna use ego mind as race consciousness, and I'm gonna use divine mind as divine mind. Okay, but when, race consciousness is the ego mind, really, right? Okay, so the good news for us is that here at Unity, we already know the goal. We know maybe what somebody who's never been to Unity and picks up this book isn't gonna know, which is that once we connect to that divine mind, that divine love, that surely the presence is in this place, when we connect with that, that's when we start showing up as our authentic self, because that is our true self, right? Does that make sense? So we're a little ahead of the game. I think we might be ahead of the game with Brene. Don't tell her I said that though, but maybe she'd appreciate it. I think we have one step up, being who we are, coming to this church, learning these principles in our daily lives, right? So what keeps us from belonging to ourself? Now, I'm going to stop for a second. I'm going to talk about the ego mind's braving the wilderness. So braving the wilderness can look like me standing up here talking. It can look like Catherine standing up and singing. Many of us that go, well, I can never do that. This is not a wilderness for me because I feel comfortable up here in many ways, Braving the wilderness can be, one time I was a drug and alcoholism counselor. I could put that in my bio. And I worked at the psychiatric hospital over on Camino O'Leary. And I didn't have a master's or anything. This was back in the, early 70s, 80s, anyway, where you could just go be one. I mean, I had training, but, there wasn't all the training and licensing that you have to have now. Let me just put it that way. So I worked in the psych hospital. There was a psychiatrist. And he put this whole family in the hospital because they had good insurance. What? Heck no. So me and all the master's level therapists and little old me were talking about it in our office one time, and we went, oh hell no, we've got to confront him. We got to do it. And they went, yeah. And I didn't bring it up. But this therapist said, we got to do this. This is wrong, and yada yada. And I'm going, yeah. So we all agreed we're going to confront him in our staff meeting. So, the staff meetings are an hour and a half long, and we're running out of time, and nobody's saying anything. And it's like, okay. I raised my hand. I braved the wilderness. And not one of those people supported me. I was furious. I braved that wilderness alone. And so he went, well, and he made someone, I don't even remember because my sense of betrayal was so big at that moment. But so there are wildernesses all over the place in the world of form that we have to brave every day to stand alone. And I'm going to tell you right, and so as an 8 on the Enneagram, I'm pretty good at braving those wildernesses out there in the world of form. That's just who I am. I am that person who's going to say something. I get in trouble for it all the time. I get in trouble for it at work. I brave the wilderness, and people go, you're the only one saying anything, and I just go, that's my job. It's my job as an 8 to say something. So anyway, so there's that wilderness. And I'm going to tell you today, the biggest wilderness that I have to face is becoming who I am. Is becoming and connecting to that presence that lives within each of us and living from that place. I remember during my early sobriety and everything, and once I found unity and found out that God really did love me and there wasn't a hell, that was a relief, But what if I really surrendered and I had to go, witness to pygmy Africans and, the Congo, and I didn't want to do that, I was young and I wanted, so that sense of surrender scared me because I wanted to be who I was. And what if God wanted me to do something I didn't want to do? I didn't want to do that. So I've spent my whole life walking away from that. I didn't want to disappear, basically, into, gosh, who wouldn't really want to disappear into the great ocean of love Not me. But when you put it that way, it sounds so silly, you know? But that's our ego mind. Our ego mind wants us to be anchored in the form, wants us to be anchored in the world, to keep us distracted from our true presence, from our true self, from the true wilderness. Now, if we talk about wilderness in the truest sense of form, going out to the vast wilderness and camping out underneath the stars at night, that really sounds peaceful and loving and just wonderful, doesn't it? And then when you hear the gentleman's story from last week about how the bear came, it can also sound really terrifying, right? So there are two aspects of wilderness. The peaceful, loving, nurturing, the one that feeds our soul. That's the divine mind. That's the divine presence. That should be our goal. All this out here is the fearful one. Now, Brene Brown gives us tools to deal with that, because dealing with the wilderness out here, if we do it in a way that's thoughtful and kind and coming from as much as we can come from that place of presence within us, helps us get to the next level. You know, so it's not for naught. It's something that we should practice, but we should also practice that inward sense of true belonging. When we heal our issues, when we heal those things that make us feel like we don't belong. You know, the Course in Miracles talks about removing the blocks to the awareness of love's presence, who we are. That's all we're doing here. When we heal our traumas, our resentments, our angers, whatever is I'm pointing out here and keeping us separated by doing this. When we heal those, then we do come from that place of presence more, and what happens is we stop sacrificing our authentic self, which is what we're doing. Anytime we try to fit into a place we don't think we belong, instead of just showing up. Now, how many people in this room have met somebody who once in their life, maybe in front of you, you felt like showed up in their authentic self? We've all had at least one of those, right? Yeah. Wow, wasn't that a wonderful presence to be in? Didn't you trust that person? Because they had no agenda. They were just showing up in that presence of love and that presence of divine mind, who could have been a guru, whoever it was for you. Well, if we didn't have that in us, we wouldn't be able to see it in them. So anytime you see somebody and they make you angry, fearful, whatever, that's your tell. That means you have an unforgiveness to go check out. And anytime you see somebody, you go, man, they're the coolest. Boy, I love that person. Boy, they always show up. Then that's your goal. Because if you didn't have it, you couldn't see it. So we all have this in us. Both of them, the ego mind. We have the scary wilderness. We have the brave wilderness. Where are you going to stand? That should be the question we all take home with us today. Where am I going to stand, and how am I going to stay there? What do I need to do to stay there? I didn't have any that written down, okay? Okay. I'm going to tell you a little story about a movie called The Iron Giant. Does anybody have kids or grandkids who've ever seen that movie? Amazing movie. So we see ourselves as separate. We're all separate forms in this room right here today, right? And so in The Iron Giant, there's this great big giant who comes from outer space, crash lands onto Earth, gets a bump on his head, and has amnesia. Now what this Iron Giant is he's a weapon. Okay, but he kind of forgets that because he has a big bump on his big steel head. And some of his pieces fly off. And when he crash lands. And this little hand, he has a little hand, or it might be a finger, is trying to find his way home. He's trying to get back to the bigger piece of the Iron Giant. Okay? And so that's how this little boy, Jack, I think is his name, finds the hand. He's like, what the heck? So he follows it, and then he sees the big Iron Giant. And so, of course, the government comes in, wants to blow it up, does all that stuff. And in the end, it does blow up the Iron Giant. Just like our ego blew up our oneness, right? So the good news is you can ever not belong. You can only be asleep to it. Because at the end of this movie, what happens after they blew up the Iron Giant, there was a little bitty screw that ended up at the North Pole. And they ended the movie with that little screw trying to find his way home. It is a great movie when you kind of look it through metaphysical eyes. Which, of course, I'd go, no, let's watch the Iron Giant. You know. So that's really what we're all doing. Everybody who doesn't belong, everybody who thinks they're separate, you know, we're all trying to find our way back to that one self, to that big one self that we are, right? So what do angry, separated people do when they feel like they don't belong? They make you don't belong, right? I'm right, you're wrong, right? Anytime you feel you're doing that, we've got a very, you know, our world right now is filled with we're right, you're wrong, isn't it? What would happen if we felt our common ground with all those people we're so angry at? We're so, are you kidding me at? We have common ground with them. What if we started finding out what that was? How could that maybe heal? Certainly would heal me, because I'd be focusing on that positive, right? Not the negative of what they're doing wrong. But that's the big ego mind's trick, like I said earlier, to keep us distracted with this over here, so that all we're aware of is our separateness, instead of finding how we do belong together. Because since we all have the spark of divinity, that's who we are. It isn't everybody, folks. We want to think it's not, but there's our common ground. And the more I can stand from that place of that word, that place of presence, then if you don't agree with me, it doesn't matter, because I am standing in that presence of love. And love is patient, and love is kind, love is compassionate. So when I'm standing in that place and you're trying to make me wrong because we have a disagreement, or because I have a different sex than you, or I have a different color, it's not going to matter to me. So all this need to fit in and the fear I'm not going to, it's wiped out when I'm standing in that place of my authentic, divine self. There's no room for fear in love. There's no room for separation in love. There's no, it dissolves. It just dissolves in there. So the thing that's important is to realize that we're always negotiating these two levels. You can't, our goal is to always be this. But we're in the world of form, we get distracted, life happens. So again, it's that importance, I think, of every day waking up and making a choice. How am I going to choose to show up today? And what do I need to do to stand there? Now, she talks about the 4 elements of true belonging. And one is people are hard to hate up close. And that is so true. That is so true. I have to practice this from a lot of work, and you've all heard me tell my work stories in retail and the people who come rage and how difficult that is, and I can walk away, and I might have shared this before. One time we have this kid who comes in our store, and he's schizophrenic. And sometimes he forgets to pay for his coffee, and he can be scary. He's not really, but if people don't know, he can be scary, whatever. And so our stance on him is, it's okay, he has an illness, we'll just let him go, he's really harmless, he's fine. Because we can see his illness. But you can't see my illness. Right? The lady who's just rude and mean and just called me a bad name, I can't see her illness. But everybody has a story, right? So I give him a break. I find my compassion for him. So I'm going to have to try and start finding my compassion for those other people whose illness is not obvious. And every time I've done that with those people, except a couple, I just can't figure these people, because I can melt anybody. I have melted so many ogres in my life. There's a couple at work. Well, one I think is actually melting because he's been smiling at me. And it's only because I confronted him once and he didn't like that. And so 8 years later, he's still not smiling. And the other one, God help her, I don't know. But, there's two people there I just can't seem to melt, but I'll keep trying. Because I know once I get up there, once I find out who they are, I'm going to find my common ground. Okay, the other one is speak the truth to BS, but be civil. Now that's what we got to work on here in our world today, right? Is being civil. Social media makes it so much easier just to say anything you want to say because they don't know where you live. They don't know you. And so that's what I love about when somebody's standing in their authentic self. And Brene Brown did that. I think in the first chapter, remember she had these speaking engagements and they wanted her to say or not say something. I can't remember what it was. And she said, gosh, that's just not me. I can't not talk about God. I think that was it or whatever. So she called them back and she didn't go, hey, look, jerks. Y'all are just so far behind what the real world's going on. She just said, you know what? That's just not me. She didn't make them wrong. She just said, that's not me. And she did it with kindness and she did it with love. And because to do it without kindness and love is not to be our authentic self, right? She just did it that way. So we can speak the truth and go, this is just what I believe. I get you see it differently. And I don't have to be angry at you for that. I don't have to hate you. I can just say, this doesn't work for me. Hold hands with strangers, but ask their permission first. Hashtag me too. But anyway, we do have to, and I think again, that's just kind of coming in close. Maybe handing, we do have a lot of homeless people who come up. We always go in loving and kind till they flip us off or yell at us or scare our customers, But at first it's like, hey, gee, I'm so sorry. And, but to not just see them as a homeless person who's, trying to get all of our money from. I mean, I have seen people who are homeless drive away in nicer cars than me, and I have to remember not all of them do that. So again, it's finding our compassion when we're doing that. The fourth one is a strong back, a soft front, and a wild heart. I would just say loving heart because I'm not quite sure if you want me to be wild. I don't know. But to have that strong back, have your own back. We got to have our own back. When I keep wanting somebody else to approve of me, have my back, whatever, I'm not taking responsibility for myself. Because then if I say, okay, Bill's got my back, and then Bill one day hurts my feelings, now who's got my back? Not Bill. He's gone. I have to have my back. And what is my back? Standing in my authentic self. Standing in that wilderness of love, peace, and compassion, which scares me. It's scary, too, as much as it sounds inviting. Okay, one more movie. Lord of the Rings. Geeks, me and Connie, we get breakfast burritos and go to the first show. Okay, so they're in the last and final movie. Aragorn, who we know, was blood. He could brave that wilderness all day long out there, sitting by the campfire, sleeping. He preferred that wilderness, right? So he didn't want to belong to the lineage of kings of men, because they were selfish and crazy and not good people. But in the final movie, the big showdown's happening. There was a sword that his ancestor broke, and it was a symbol to him of the betrayal and weakness that his great-great-great-great-grandfather did, whatever. So in the final movie, the king of the elves, can't remember his name because he wasn't as cute as Aragorn, but anyway, invites him into his tent, pulls out the sword that's been remade, and says to Aragorn, it's time for you to step into your greatness. It's time for you to become who you were born to be. And that is what we must do. That is what we must do today. So, I'm going to leave this with Brene's final thing that I just love her. This book was so crazy. I mean, I thought, oh, God, this is great. And I'd have all these ideas, and I'd go sit down and write, and I'd feel overwhelmed. I couldn't type fast enough, just to know everything. And I just kept hearing this voice, just come from that place of excitement and joy. Just go there, because there's so many things. We could spend 2 or 3 weeks, I think, on this chapter. So she says, true belonging is the spiritual practice of believing in yourself so deeply that you can share your most authentic self with the world and find sacredness in both being a part of something and standing alone in the wilderness. True belonging doesn't mean you change who you are. It requires that you be who you are. And we have the joy and the luxury of knowing that we are the presence of divine love. That's who we are. So, what I believe now, and I believe that she helped me put it into words, is that when I belong to myself, the capital S, the divine self, not the ego mind self, I belong anywhere I show up. I belong anywhere in the world. And it is a belonging that you can't take from me. The only thing that takes me from that place is my fear, my anger, my judgment, feeling guilty, any of those. That's what takes me away. There is no loneliness in divine presence. There is no separateness when we steep ourselves in divine love. Thank you. So we're going to have just a short meditation. Do I have time? Because I'm over. Yes. Okay. Short little meditation. Just bring your attention into this moment. Ooh, now I'm away from the mic. You can hear me. Bring your attention into this moment. Feel your feet on the floor. Take a deep breath. I am open to the experience of true belonging. I am open to the experience of true belonging. I am grateful for the experience of true belonging. If something touched or woke up, made you think today of an experience where you could stand alone in your wilderness, or a place that might need some healing, I want you to bring that experience into this moment right now. Think about it, feel about it. What could I do different to shift this experience into one of true belonging? Can I be more loving to myself? Can I be more loving to someone else? If we ask in this moment that our divine self show us the ways that we can undo, unlove, show us those places that need attention. Let our divine self guide us. I am open to the experience of true